Hello there.
Welcome to the very first episode of Star Wars, a theme between themes. This is an In a Galaxy spin-off show. You are entering another plane. A plane where we leave behind the logistical issues, canon continuity, and the Easter eggs. Only here are thematic ideas and symbolic imagery. You are entering a theme between themes. What's in here? Only what you take with you. Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Eli. Jacob, unfortunately, cannot be here with me. But never fear. I have two other guests on this show to help, hopefully, fill his void. We have from Ahch-To Radio and its spin-off show, the Mandalorian Creed, Alden Diaz and Tori Fox. Returning guest Alden Diaz and new guest Tori Fox. How are the both of you doing?
Yay, good. I like that intro. It was very Twilight Zone. It was hard for me to not do the little do.
To be completely real, I was testing it out yesterday and I'm like,
good.
This sounds exactly like Twilight Zone.
It does. It's good though. I like it.
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, I felt like I was getting ready to hop into the old Tower of Terror there. I could feel the ride jitters coming on. I'm doing good, man. Thanks for inviting us back. This time, obviously, the pair of us, and we're going to get into a nice heady conversation, but I'm excited.
So I wanted to have Alden and Tori on specifically because it was one of Alden's comments on his last episode on the show that pretty much kicked off this idea.
What is your favorite trilogy of Star Wars?
Does it have to be trilogy of movies?
What are you suggesting?
Because I love the trilogies within the trilogies. I love the trilogies within the framework. Because if I could somehow, I love the trilogies that you can make, like the Ahsoka trilogy of, of Clone Wars, then her book, then Rebels, or alternatively, Clone Wars, Rebels, Chapter 13, Mandalorian. The Bo-Katan trilogy of Clone Wars, Rebels, Mando. Ken Napzok calls it the boot of the Empire, that era, that 19 years. We could see something like Bad Batch, Solo, Rogue One, or I would say,
Rogue One.
Yeah, I would go Fallen Order, Solo, Rebels.
You can hear, of course, Alden saying about the trilogies, between the trilogies, I think he called it. And that got the wheels in my head turning. And so I decided to start this little spin-off show. We're going to have many a guest on and many a theme or a character or all that that we'll be discussing. The point of this is that as much as I and Jacob love viewing Star Wars chronologically, it adds a really great tone to the universe. We also love watching things that you wouldn't think would fit together, but when you look at it together in this sort of kaleidoscope, I guess you could call it, taken separately, they may seem unrelated, but put together, they reveal a larger picture, as Grand Admiral Thrawn would say. So I asked Tori and Alden to pick a character or a theme or something else that binds these episodes together, and they chose the theme of found family. And they also chose these 3 episodes to represent the Star Wars theme of found family. We have Season 1, Episode 3 of The Mandalorian, Chapter 3, The Sin. We have Episode 2 of Season 1 of The Bad Batch, called Cut and Run, which, at the time they sent this to me, I hadn't seen yet, which was a strange sensation, but okay. And finally, the 16th episode of the 4th season, the final episode of Star Wars Rebels, Family Reunion and Farewell, Part 2. And so, before we get into looking at those, I'd like to ask Tori, as a new guest onto this show, give us a little bit of your background. How did you get into Star Wars?
I'm one of those people. I don't have like a super fantastic story per se. I feel like some people are like, I remember the first time I watched Star Wars. I don't. I was very young. My family was always really into Star Wars, so I just grew up with it. But I will say, I've been very fortunate to grow up in the Orlando area. So, partnerships with Disney have been happening for a really long time, even prior to Disney outright owning Star Wars and Lucasfilm and all of that. So I've been able to kind of experience Star Wars in a very tangible way. From a very young age, specifically through things like Star Wars weekends that they had and things like that. So that's kind of like the basis for my fandom is my family and them showing me the movies and taking me to theme parks.
Also, I'd like to ask how you got into, your shop Creature Cartel and all of the Star Wars content creation you do. Exclude the Mandalorian Creed because I want to ask about that separately. So
No worries. No worries. Yeah, I've been making stuff for as long as I can remember. And when I got out of high school, really got into prop making and things like that. And I went to special effects makeup school because I was so inspired by the creatures that you see on the screen, specifically in places like Star Wars or E.T. or the Universal Monsters. So that was kind of a basis for me creating, and I was able to kind of transition that into the scenic world. So working on things for theme parks and making really cool aspects of theme parks come to life. So I've been doing that professionally and then kind of as a side thing occasionally when I want to make something. And Creature Cartel just kind of happened that way. I made some things for some friends at Star Wars Celebration Chicago. It was my Japor snippet necklace, the one that Anakin gives to Padme in The Phantom Menace. People loved it, so I made a little storefront, and it kind of sat there until 2019 when COVID hit, and I started making the shop a living. So that's kind of how it all happened. It was all kind of an accident, to be honest, but it's been really fun.
I've loved seeing the stuff you're making on there. Moving into the Mandalorian Creed, I'm gonna just do a free for all with this one. Both of you, in any order you want. How did this happen? How did the Mandalorian Creed happen? I've been loving listening to all of the stuff you're putting out on there. How did it happen?
Thank you. I mean,
Well,
Alden was kind of like, "Hey, you want to do it?" And I was like, "Okay."
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like how did it happen is one of those things where I don't know if any of you saw the movie Tenet. But it
I still haven't
is
seen it.
I'm not saying it's amazing. It's not one of my favorite Nolan movies, but what I do like about it is that the time travel in Tenet, this is going somewhere. This will be relevant to the answer. The time travel in Tenet is all about how certain characters, also they do this in Doctor Who as well, with River Song, the character of River Song in Doctor Who. And certain characters that you're watching on screen are moving this way in time. Certain characters are moving this way in time. So some people are reaching the end of their story and some people are reaching the beginning of another story. And so things are always flip-flopping and things are colliding. And I feel like that's almost kind of what happened with Tori and I on this show, where we both wanted to do something, but we were coming at it from different angles. And these ideas were happening independently. So I had been thinking in private, like not on Twitter, not outwardly on the show, a while about wanting to produce a second show but not host it myself, wanting another show to be there that would get its own slate of guests, its own angles, its own topics and everything. And I had been thinking for a while, like, I should ask Tori, because Tori had already been on Ahch-To Radio 3 or 4 times before that. And we had mulled over before doing a couple different ideas together. But it was all like, oh, maybe, down the road, and we had done some spitballing and stuff. But then, I'll throw it over to Tori at the same time as some of this and publicly, she wanted to do a certain project on Star Wars weekends. And so then that's when,
Yeah, that was when you
it sort of
messaged
clicked.
and
Yeah.
were like, "Hey, you wanna make it a podcast?" And I was like, "Sure."
Yeah, I think without any further ado, I think we should get into our first episode here, The Sin. I'd first like to talk about the fortune cookie. Oh, dang it! That's the wrong show. Dang it. Whoops.
Oh.
Okay.
You just had your Clone Wars instincts take over?
Yep.
I legitimately wrote in my notes, fortune cookie is, oh wait, wrong TV show.
Okay, yeah. If this episode did have a fortune cookie, I think that it should be "Get away from my son" in all
Away
caps.
from my son.
Hey, look,
Or it's that clownfish meme. Give me back my son.
Where's my son?
I will take up your challenge. I don't know if you both saw with our last episode of Star Wars in the Galaxy, I edited some fortune cookies that Jacob and I made for the movies onto the Clone Wars thing. I will edit in all caps, "Get away from my son."
Please.
It's gonna happen. Actually, I want to ask one more question before we get into the actual analysis of the episodes. This is for the episode. Why did you both choose Found Family?
I mean, I know why I did. I mean, I think my main reason is kind of superficial, honestly, just because I feel like it was really on my mind with Bad Batch just, starting to come out and, kind of how the direction that that's all headed. I think that was kind of just, I was thinking already about the similarities between Omega's story and kind of Grogu and things like that. But I will also say, in kind of contemplating this after we kind of decided on the theme, like I do really identify with the idea of Found Family, like personally in my life. So
yeah, I would agree with that. And when we were talking behind the scenes about what theme to pick, I mean, it's something that comes up a lot on Ahch-To Radio and on the Mandalorian Creed, of just like how these characters come together in different ways, and how I talk a lot about character relationships and callbacks and call forwards and like the tapestry type stuff. And then on Tori's side of things, I would point a lot to her conversation with Alyssa Bradley from Whimsy Design, of how much we can see sort of like visual connections between people that aren't related, through their legacies, through their lightsaber hilts, through what they're passing down each other, masters and apprentices and things like that. So it's just dripping, from literally the get of Star Wars. It's not like it was something that came up later in New Hope or throughout the original trilogy. Like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru are right there at the beginning. And why is Leia on the Tantive 4? It's because of her adoptive father. And so immediately we know that that's the crux of Star Wars, and you won't escape it. We'll never escape it. It doesn't matter if it's scum and villainy or troopers or Jedi or creatures or whatever area is your area. It's there. I mean, even with, this is not the Mandalorian episode we're talking about, but with someone like IG and Queel, like how he nursed him and raised him and taught him new ways and taught him how to walk again and taught him how to be more than just a killer. So yeah, it immediately, when Tori was like, we should do this, it was like, it wasn't a question of where do we start, it's how do we rein it in, because there's so many.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
I would just like to add that Found Family is one of my favorite thematic threads throughout the Star Wars. When Alden sent it to me, I thought in my head, okay, so we're gonna jump in head first. We're not gonna do other things, and eventually we'll get there. We're gonna dive in, and I admire that. I admire that. It's weird because I still I did the fortune cookie thing as kind of a joke, but it's weird for me to jump into an episode without that now. So I guess I'll throw it to either one of you for the first episode of The Sin. Where do either of you want to start? If neither of you have anything, I can always start with an idea I have.
Well, I'll go, just because my perspective on this is a little bit, so many of these things are about when you saw it, how you saw it, sort of like where you were at that time in your life. And I was lucky enough to see the first 3 episodes of Mandalorian in a movie theater, back to back to back. And the way that it's like coming off of The Child. Yeah, it was really, really powerful, because then and no one had seen episodes 2 and 3 yet. So when it ends in The Sin on the Mandalorian covert all flying in, that really did feel like the end of a movie. So it was really wild. And coming off of The Child, you get the reveal that, at the time, Baby Yoda, before we knew the child's name was Grogu, getting that reveal that it can use the Force, and getting that reveal that it is not a passive participant in the story, which is something that we'll get to with Omega, in Omega in Cut and
I
Run.
love her so much.
Yeah, she's
Sorry,
wonderful.
I had to jump in there. I love her so much.
No, please, no. I mean, that part of that is these kids. I mean, this was the episode. The child was the episode that let us see sort of Grogu as an active participant, wanting to heal Din, and getting out of the pram and walking a little bit and things like that. Now we had to see that moment of the parent makes the choice, and so what we've laid out here, sort of in our conversations behind the scenes, is you get the parents making a choice, the children sort of affirming their place, and then sort of how it all comes together. And that's something that you can sort of find throughout all of these in Star Wars. And so I think that where I would like to start in this episode, with all that being said, is that Din in the cockpit of the Razor Crest, about to leave, having completed the mission, but seeing that the little silver ball was missing, and that being what triggers it, is so quintessentially Star Wars. It's so George Lucas, because it requires no dialogue. It's just a visual imagery of something's missing. Something's literally missing. And the fact that that's what made him go like, damn, something is missing. Like, I've only had this kid for a few days, but the kid should be here. And how that is what launches this entire sprawling story. So I think that that's why the Sin is the perfect sort of kickoff in a lot of ways, because with other found families in Star Wars, like we mentioned Queel and IG, we get that in a flashback. And with like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, we get to see when they receive baby Luke, but we don't get to see, maybe we will in the Kenobi show, but we don't get to see conversations about, them the next morning. Like, what do we do with this baby? Like,
no, we have a baby now.
Yeah, we don't ever really get to see the parents in that first moment. And this
show
you
don't have
gave
the
us
intro.
That ball
Yeah.
is
so to
definitely
speak.
in
Yeah.
my notes of this episode. Yeah. It's interesting to me because, like, that ball, for me at least, represents, like, kind of the playfulness of Grogu. Din, up to that point, and still beyond that point, is he's a very serious guy. He doesn't have a sense of fun to him yet, and it takes a while to build that sense of playfulness,
right,
of joy, of but like that ball is, we talk about the I was just thinking to myself that, like, all three of these episodes have that one event that pretty much defines the entire episode, tying into Found Family, and and of course this one is Din deciding to go back for Grogu, and this little kid came into his life and changed him.
Right.
Yeah.
And Star Wars, in these three episodes, we'll see that Star Wars is so inherently, not always, but positive about found families and the effect of found families. Often, that found family, that the family you gather beside you, is stronger than who you're related to, than your blood family.
No, I just had a thought, and it's something that I will probably bring up every time, because when I was rewatching each of these episodes, of course, our main focus of each episode, we have that, but it's interesting to see, in pretty much every episode that we talk about today, there is like an additional example that's like a smaller one. It's not like in your face, like it's not, Din and Grogu, but you mentioned it already, the covert showing up, right? So, like, I love that that's kind of another layer to it. And, of course, they're not really there for him all the time. I mean, I'm sure if he wanted to go with them, they would be. But, he kind of has a separate path at this point. But they were still family enough to be able to show up and help him out when he really needed it. And I love that.
Yeah, Eli, you mentioned how sometimes these are stronger than our blood families. And sometimes that is with, for better and for worse, depending on who your blood family is. Sometimes, people in Star Wars are forsaken by their blood family. Sometimes their blood family is the root of all of their pain. Sometimes, but sometimes it's a great thing. But they lost to them, like we'll get to with Ezra Bridger. His parents are dead. Of course he has to build anew and he has to find something. But with the covert and Din being sort of the backdrop of what's going on, it's weird to see sort of like that dynamic. That was sort of fresh, I thought, for Star Wars, because he has this maternal figure with the armorer who's really enigmatic, and you're not really sure if he's privy to everything about her, but she seems really privy to everything about him. So she seems like she's rearing Din in a certain direction and is trying to take care of all of these people. And you're not really sure in those first couple episodes, like, is this a bad group of Mandalorians? Is it a good group of Mandalorians? And it's that them showing up at the end to help him save this kid and forgoing the secrecy of the covert, because their secrecy, is the survival. That was the whole thing.
Big step.
Yeah, and then they blow it all willingly for this child and bring hell on the town after that.
I mean, look at him.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, it's freaking adorable. But that tells you so much about them. I mean, what does the armorer say to Din when Din says, I would use the leftover Beskar for the foundlings, to sponsor the foundlings? And she's like, of course, the foundlings are the future. Like, it's such a rich sense of, even more so than the Jedi, which is an interesting sort of, whereas the Jedi are like, we need blank slate children. We need people that we can impart our ways onto. Whereas the Mandalorians are like, we know. Exactly, yeah. The Mandalorians are more like, oh, we know we all come from different places. We're going to acknowledge that full front. This is a hard life, and we need to take care of the orphans because they're the future. The Jedi are way colder at this point. We've seen, obviously, wonderful Jedi in the past now, but
as they say as Dan himself says in what is that, Redemption, the Mandalorian way isn't a race, it's a creed. It's that passing on of, what I was gonna say is I thought about that, the covert, and I'm not sure if it's because of now having seen season 2 of The Mandalorian, having seen the Heiress, or the found family lens, or both. I think it's probably because of both. I have never been so scared by the phrase, "this is the way." Like, it became a humongous meme. It became a humongous just fixture of, like, the Star Wars internet culture after the release of The Mandalorian. I've never been so scared, because we see, as Alden was saying a little bit before, that, like, this is a there are toxic elements of this found family. There are it's the whole, the purification tests. Have you ever taken off your helmet? Has anybody taken it off for you? We see later that Din forgoes that, but the idea that found family doesn't always have to be a good thing.
And even if they care about you, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily right. Like, it's not that the armorer doesn't care about the people that are with her, but like Bo-Katan says,
culty, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But Bo-Katan's like, well, they're I'm intense, but they're freaks. Like,
what I have to say though. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna finish up by saying that so even though she may have and seems to have the best intentions of, like, wanting to keep them alive, if Din had stuck by her ways, maybe they wouldn't have gotten out of the Imperial refinery. Like, sometimes you do need to break your parents' rules. Which I think is such a big idea in the Sin, is he breaks the Bounty Guild rules to do what he needs to do. But Tori, you were gonna say.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, as we're talking, I'm actually, like, having these thoughts as we're talking that, like, yes, they're culty, but at the same time, I have to say, and it kind of ties back into what you were saying before about they recognize the foundlings of the futures, foundlings, like, adoptiveness is great, but it's interesting that they are able to kind of realize, okay, Din's journey is going somewhere different, and they can still be supportive of that. Like, that's still pretty cool, even if they are a little.
Yeah,
because
too many rules.
Yeah, no, totally. I love that you said that, being supportive of someone else's path, going a different way. I mean, that's something that we see peppered throughout all the episodes I think that we're going to talk about, particularly the Rebels finale, is that sometimes it is about letting go. And even though the armorer isn't letting go of Din, the armorer still considers Din part of the covert. This is his mission to return this child home. You are as its father until it gets back to its people. That mentality still comes from a place of wanting the future to be okay and wanting people to be able to expand their horizons in ways that they need to. And we see that with Omega being allowed to leave Kamino. That Lamasu, it seems like, well, it wasn't actually Lamasu, it was the other Kaminoan scientist, Nala Se, who was like, beep boop, like, let me let them escape. Sometimes you need to be able to take those chances.
Yeah, and also with kind of everyone, because actually I just watched the Rebels today. It had been a while, and I was crying, by the way, but it's fine. Just them being understanding, like, there wasn't, because if that was me and Ezra just like bopped on out of there, I'd be like, what the heck? I'd be so pissed. But everyone was just like, okay, like, he has to do this. It's his journey. Like, very accepting, very, very nice. Very nice. But I would be like, what the heck?
Yeah. There's that, I love this, one of the things that I think is the Mandalorian in general as a show's, one of its greatest strengths, is that even when the story doesn't work as well for me, which doesn't happen a lot, the execution of the story is always so well thought out and well done. There's that line at the very beginning which seems so inconsequential but tells us literally everything we need to know about the episode, when Din's receiving the holo message from Grief Karga. I have no idea if he wants to eat it or hang it on his wall. There's that idea that Din didn't really ever know what was going to happen to Grogu. And I would point out, I'm not excusing the Empire here. I'm not doing that at all. They have Grogu in Imperial custody for, I'm gonna say, about the equivalent of 2 or 3 episodes. And he is, from what we know, completely fine. I mean, of course, because I'm down of universe reason is because I know several people in this fandom who would absolutely go on a rampage if anything happened to that precious child.
That's me.
It's him.
But the reality is that, the Imperial Remnant never does anything to Grogu. And from what we know of their plan, which is very little, it doesn't seem to me as if they would do anything particularly harmful to the kid. But Din doesn't care. Din goes back anyway. Din fights through all those stormtroopers and Imperial Remnant troops anyway. And he does that because this kid's changed him. He does that because Slap's poster. Anytime I reference Last Jedi, I go Slap's poster. He's saving what he loves. There's another thing I love too, which is a really interesting piece of symbolism that I only noticed this time around, which is that Din drops off Grogu at the Imperial Remnant with his he drops off Grogu at the Imperial Remnant and almost immediately goes back to save him. Except for one little detail. What does he do in between those two? He gets himself his new set of armor. He is literally becoming a new person.
Yeah.
He is getting a literal new coat of armor.
Yeah.
It's that change in him that I think is represented so well.
And what is that? One of my favorite lines of dialogue. It's not just that he goes and he says, I need a new armor. It's that he says to the armorer, My armor has lost its integrity. I may need to begin anew.
Yeah.
It's like he's talking about his soul.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those lines.
Mhm.
That's one of those lines that is so Star Wars and rich that if I'm Jon Favreau and I wrote that line, I would have been like, self 5. Like that's
Oh, yeah.
just like you're so proud of yourself. Like, oh, that's so good. First time I saw that line, I was like, this show gets it. Because remember, the Mandalorian is the greatest magic trick that Star Wars has ever pulled. Because all Star Wars up until the Mandalorian was honest about what it was. The Mandalorian marketed and sold itself as not Boba Fett. Like that was kind of what the selling was. Like this is going to be a gunslinger, a gunfighter, the Outer Rim regions. It looked interesting. It looked great, but nobody was actually being told what it was, which is this really sensitive parenting story.
Yeah.
Even
like, even that same exact year, Kathleen Kennedy was quoted as saying that they revealed Palpatine's entrance in Rise of Skywalker at Celebration so they would not pull another Baby Yoda. That was literally her exact wording.
Yeah. Everything about
legendary.
And they pulled it off, not having the toys in production, not having anybody outside of the crew know, not having any it'll never get done again. I can tell you that. And
I can't even believe that it worked out the first time.
I would actually argue that a similar thing has been done on the set of that very same show.
With
Luke.
With Luke? Yeah, it's true. That's true.
That's a fair point. Yeah, he didn't really.
That's true.
I don't think
that
they everything on that show. It's incredible to me how everything on that show got leaked and Luke didn't. It was.
Well, I feel like that was definitely like a let the Hollywood reporters think that they figured everything out. Like those are Hollywood does a lot of like letting scoops go that are not what they consider to be paramount, but I mean
distraction.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they're like, let them know that Ahsoka's going to be in the show because they have no idea what else we're going to do. So they'll think that they got this big story, but it was, I mean, so just tying back to everything with that integrity stuff. And like you said, the new armor, it's great that you brought that up because when he gets the full Beskar armor and he walks into the cantina after that and he walks right up to Grief. And that's when he starts saying like, do you know what they're going to do to the kid? Now he's asking questions that hunters don't ask. And Grief even says like, that's not what we do. Like we have a no question policy.
Him and
the client.
The client, yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're not supposed to ask that question.
How uncharacteristic for someone of your profession.
That's really good. Thank you.
He's fantastic.
I try to do it. I can't.
I can't look at that man again without looking at that video about speaking French.
Oh yeah, that's great. Tori, have you ever seen that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
There's another thing actually in here, which is another thing I love about Star Wars, and this is a universal Star Wars thing. And the idea that Star Wars doesn't do badass moments to do a badass moment. They never there's never a cavalry arrives moment or anything any character has done badass in Star Wars has been for a reason. Prime example of that is, Din tearing up that the Imperial Remnant base. That was up to the covert arriving later in the episode, the most badass thing we had ever seen anybody do in that show. Up to that point, I'd argue. Point is that he didn't do that because he could do that. He did that because he had to save his surrogate son. He did that because
it's all very the way that it uses violence and all three of these episodes. I mean, you've got the Bad Batch, who are 5 of the most violent and badass characters in Star Wars, and then later on you've got Ezra, who's no slouch, but he doesn't win by kicking Thrawn's ass. So these episodes emphasize sort of those themes, and I like that Din in episodes 1 and 2. He's very shoot to kill. We see what he does to that Quarren at the beginning of the show, and that shot that became the big trailer shot. He literally uses a door to chop the man in half. Whereas in this episode, he knows that Grief has the Beskar in his breast pocket, so he shoots the Beskar. And you could make the argument of maybe he did shoot to kill, but I don't think that.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, I think
I
that he
never
did
considered
shoot.
that before.
I think he
It
shot him
was
there on purpose.
Yeah.
Because he knew that Grief didn't deserve to die.
Yeah. I also like the idea of symbolism with that Beskar, is that Grief got shot in the Beskar, which has already been a symbol of forging anew, so that he could forge anew in the later part of the season.
Yeah, and that's something that I love about Grogu throughout, is the way that Grogu changes everybody. I mean, Grief was one way until Grogu healed him and saved his life.
And then he was a grandpa. In the show.
Yeah, then he's like, I can't.
Where's my grandchild?
Yeah.
Has he been treating you well?
Precious little creature. Yeah, he's the best. And
I really hope we see more of him.
Yeah, like every single person. And again, like theme between themes, obviously we're meant to focus on these three, but just as we tie it all together, as we move back, every single adult in this show, with the exception of maybe Gideon, although you could argue that maybe he changed, Grogu changes Gideon for the worse, makes him more obsessed, but Din, Grief, Ahsoka, Luke, Boba Fett, Fennec, everybody, Pelly, yeah.
Pelly.
Everybody is elevated by this kid.
She was playing the sabacc with the pit droids, but then she came to care for this little creature. Yeah.
She got those maternal moments, and then even Boba Fett, later on, in one of my favorite moments ever with that character, is when he's like, "Oh, we're not done." He's like, "What I said was until the child is safe," and that's when you're like, "Oh, Boba, you're a real one." Like that's when you're like, this man is a ride or die homie. He's like, if Boba is Grogu's uncle as much as Grief is his grandpa.
Absolutely.
In my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. There's. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I was just shocked when he said that. I was like, oh my gosh, everyone's along for the ride, yay!
I just saw another thing on my notes that I love. And I surprised myself with figuring this one out. I want to talk about another minor character in this episode that might also have to do with some found family issues, and that is Dr. Pershing.
Dr. Pershing. One of 3 Star Wars characters with glasses, ladies and gentlemen. 3.
Oh man.
Who are the other 2? I'm trying to think.
Wait, now I'm trying to figure that out.
Tech.
Dr. Pershing.
Or as Omega calls him, Tick.
It's Tech, Dr. Pershing, and Josh Gad's character in Rebels, the Imperial Controller.
Right.
The Pablo Hidalgo stand-in.
Yeah, the Hidalgo. Yeah, Pablo Hidalgo. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's got glasses as well. So I always look for my glasses people. Pershing is interesting, obviously with the Kaminoan connection.
I'm telling you,
he made a deal with the devil. And there's that we see in this episode, and we see in the Rescue, which I also happened to watch recently again. That this guy is not a bad guy. He isn't evil like the Client or Gideon is. It seems like, again, and I want to know this guy's backstory, because it definitely seems like he was promised X and he got Y. What those variables stand in for, we don't know. But what the first thing he does when Din walks in, he's like, I did not hurt this guy. He makes a lot of his decisions out of fear of what will happen to him should he do otherwise. And I'm interested to see what promises Dr. Pershing was made and how he got to the way he is, basically.
Yeah, I hope we see more of him and we figure all that out. I can only assume so, because I feel like, especially with the Bad Batch, I feel like Kamino's here to stay story-wise for a while, even if it's physically present or not. I think it's happening. I think we're learning more and more about all that. But I agree. I think Pershing is someone who, now, were these the right decisions? Probably not. But I think that he definitely was not down to clown with all of with the whole picture.
Yeah.
I think he's a man of science. I think he wants to, do fun sciencey things and not hurt anybody. Maybe he's one of those people that was like, well, I can do whatever and or I can refuse and they kill me, or I do it and maybe I do it in my own way, which will hopefully minimize damage to other people.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And I think it's interesting, again, that whatever his backstory is, the connection to cloning, be that the Grand Army of the Republic or maybe a different Camino project, because there's always that great little George Lucas seed of Lama Su saying one of the finest we've ever created. So it's like there's plenty of other clones out there that are not Jango clones, it seems.
Yeah.
And the fact that is always out there, like, could lead to so many other families. And like we're about to talk about Cut and Run as the second episode, and so much of that is these lines being blurred between familial roles, and not in a Game of Thronesy way. It's not weird. There's no there's no dad uncles or girlfriend aunts, but there are like Hunter is her father and her brother. Like Cut is her brother and her uncle. Like these people are bound in so many different ways based on their ages and experiences and roles and the level of individuality that they've embraced. And so Pershing could open up like there are people that still subscribe to the belief that Grogu is a clone of Yoda, and I don't believe that, but
I hope not. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like it either. But
I get the same reaction to that I get by thinking that by people saying that Omega is a failed clone of Palpatine. It's like,
yeah, oh
yeah,
no,
but like, what would that
Boo.
do?
Yeah, I don't care that they have the same little hairstyle. I don't care.
Yeah.
I was saying, like,
also
the accent.
Omega changed her hair anyway.
Like, come
Yeah.
on.
She's we could talk Omega theories on and off the air, but it's definitely rooted in Django for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think
is what
so. I think so.
But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have on the set.
Yeah, I was about to say, are we just gonna go into Cut and Run?
Seems like a smooth transition to me.
Yeah.
Boom.
Before we get into Cut and Run, I would just like to point out that I think a completer experience of this episode. If you have not listened to Star Wars in a Galaxy, let me look at the episode 42, A Lesson of Choice. I would encourage you, if you have not before this part, to go listen to at least the part of that covers the deserter, because I've talked a little bit about Cut and Run on the show because of our Bad Batch mini reviews before our episodes, but the deserter is an episode that means so much to me in the grand scheme of Star Wars, and
It's great.
Cut and Run. It's a weird dilemma I had with Cut and Run. I'm like, it can never like do what the deserter did because the deserter was so singularly unique. But if there was ever a satisfying sequel to that, this is good. I like this. Yeah. So I'll again turn it over to both of you. Do you have anywhere to start? I can always start if.
I'll start. First of all, it was great seeing Cut and Sue again. I love them so much. But no, this
it
episode
was great seeing Sue again.
I was so excited. I love her so much. I was like, oh my god, they're going there. It was so exciting. But
I looked up Sector J19 after that first episode. I'm like, no, they're not doing Salute. I mean, I knew from like various photos from the trailer that they could be going to Salute My Balloon.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Salute
no, they're not doing it. They're
doing
not.
it. They're doing it.
And then they touch down and I see the farm like, so my mind's about to be blown again.
Very exciting. But I really enjoyed that episode for the found family reasons because, of course, on the surface, there's Omega and kind of something that I find really interesting in all of these stories is, in the three that we're talking about, is that they all focus around, like, yes, found family, but the idea of, like, a choice.
Yeah.
So someone choosing this path for themselves that maybe isn't, like, the most easy path. So you have that with Mando. He's kind of ditching his old his whole fun bounty hunting life and kind of gonna become a dad. And then it's kind of the same thing in this episode, only it's kind of a reversal of and while I do think that Hunter and the gang are choosing to be with Omega, I think that was a choice. I think they really like Omega. This episode's ultimately about Omega making the choice for herself of where she's going to go and if she's going to stay with the people that she really wants to be with, as opposed to going with another family who's nice. They're great. I mean, Sue's the best. I want Sue to be my mom, but she feels very drawn to this pack of weird men.
to the Ninja Turtles of Star Wars.
To the Ninja Turtles of Star Wars. She feels very drawn to them, and that's awesome. And she's able to make that choice, and it's big, and it was really cool to kind of see that almost role reversal from what you maybe see with like Mando. But yeah, I love that.
Okay, Alden, to your credit, I'm never calling them the Star Wars X-Men again. I'm calling them
No, it's the Ninja. Yeah, it's the Ninja Turtles for sure.
But yeah, so in this one, just building off of Tori introing this episode of talking a little bit about what you said so perfectly there about making that choice and how parental figures need to do that. We see that in the Sin, but how the children also have their own agency in Star Wars. They also choose to find their tribe and they choose to honor their parents in certain ways. I think Leia is a great example of that, of how Leia she's a little bit of Bail, a little bit of Brea, but also very much Anakin's daughter and very much Padme's daughter, and how she chooses to put forth what she wants to be. Omega needs to make that decision here too. And Omega can choose the path between, and I know that Dave Filoni isn't as hands-on with this one. Credit to head writer Jennifer Corbett and supervising director Brad Rao. But one thing that I know Dave loves is Lone Wolf and Cub. And in Lone Wolf and Cub, the son is placed before his father, and he's a baby, like 18-month-old, 2-year-old, and the baby is given the choice between the sword and the ball. If you choose the ball, that's the child's way, and I'll kill you, and you can go to the afterlife and be with your mother. If you choose the sword, then you're with me in this life. And I think that this is obviously less dramatic than that. There's not going to be any samurai killing of babies, but Omega has to look at her life and say, do I choose the child's way? She tries to learn to play. She really does try to learn to play. She doesn't really understand it. And that's why she gets into the trouble with the, yeah. She gets into the trouble where Sue has to go on the roof and start shooting at the next Sue. But there's the other choice, which is danger, which is running, through the Imperial port, trying to get the chain codes and everything that's happening. And she chooses that path. And Grogu had to make that choice in his own ways almost a couple of times, so it's not a 1-to-1 every time, but
no, yeah,
I think that, yeah, but it was very, and also he's also a different, Omega is an older kid and Grogu is a baby, so it's a little,
and also Star Wars often has characters learning the same lesson more than once. It's
for sure, you have to keep making that choice. I mean, that's the whole thing with Qui-Gon, like you turn to the light because it's there. It's something that you do all the time.
Yeah.
Which is something that I really appreciate about this. And I also thought that it was important to talk about, and I'll throw it over to you, Eli, because it's your show, but also because, also, sorry if I
no, we're good. I've been sometimes forgetting, so that's a good reminder.
No, but just that tossing it over to you, because you mentioned, your great discussion on the deserter, having Cut be the one in Hunter's ear that's like, hey, being a dad is hard, and you're not gonna pick this up.
Battling
like a
droids
mission,
was easy compared to raising a kid as one of those.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, and the fact that it's important that Tarkin says, and that they establish a couple times, the Bad Batch have 100% mission completion.
Yep.
They are undefeated on the battlefield. They've never lost. They've never not completed a mission. And so you have people that have every reason to be the most confident about everything they do. And this little girl is making them look like idiots.
Yeah. We see their battlefield effectiveness firsthand in that first episode on Anaxes, but yeah, they can't raise this. I actually put it in a different direction, which is that little speech that Yoda goes on to Luke in Empire, when he says, "If you do what Vader did, if you choose the quick and easy path, you will become an agent of evil." It's the with the sword and the ball analogy. It's the easy path. That's another thing that ties into all three of these. It's the easy path versus the hard path. And they choose the hard path every time because it's the more rewarding one in the end, and they know that.
Yeah. And it's also like your decisions, like Luke in Empire. If Luke, chooses the quick and easy path, we see what happens. He makes
helmet splits half. Vader,
his Vader helmet, and then later on the losing of the hand. Like if Omega chooses the easy path here, which might be more compassionate, might be more lovely, might be more caring, going with Cut and Sue and being adopted by them, essentially, she doesn't realize this yet, and neither do we as the viewer. We get an inkling of it, but who's to say that Fennec Shand doesn't show up and kill Cut, Sue and the kids? Who's to say that Lama Su or Tarkin or Admiral Rampart, any of these villains, don't go after them? She needs to choose the hard path, because the hard path is in an ironic way ends up being the path that can protect her, and not putting other people in the path of danger. Which is interesting.
I warned Alden about this in my direct messages to him. It's time, because it's a specific parallel with the show that a lot of people were talking about, and I want to kind of delve into that deeper meaning of it, which is when Omega touches the dirt. You know where I'm going with this? It's that line from Rey in The Force Awakens. I never knew there was this much green in the entire galaxy. And both of those show the same thing, which is that it's how found family changes you. We talked about how Grogu changed Din. This is the opposite way around. How the elders changed. It's why members of Omega has no blood family. She was raised with the Kaminoans and the clones, who I guess are kind of her blood family, but they've become faceless until now. If Rey had if everything had worked out the way things were supposed to for Rey, she was going to be raised in what was essentially a Sith cult. And Omega chooses the batch the same way Rey chooses Rey Skywalker as her name and her path, because members of Omega's found family treat her like she is, not like what she could be. Just the same way Rey's found family treat her.
She's not just part of an experiment to Tarkin or to Lama Su. So I see that as well, and you made me think with I never thought there could be so much green. Who is the elder with her in that moment? It's Han Solo. And what about Han Solo's moment with Beckett, where Han says, I'm not sure if he said tribe or family, and Beckett says, what's the difference? That's where that idea starts for Han, and that gets passed down in a lot of ways down to Rey and to it's such an underrated moment where Beckett, not the best guy, but he at least philosophically did understand how to have a crew.
He's
with
a complicated
Rio.
Person.
He did he kill Aura Sing's
reports?
He didn't. I don't trust him. I don't trust him.
Tori would disagree.
I don't trust him at all. There's no body. I haven't seen anything.
Aura would definitely kick Beckett's ass in a fight. So
for sure.
But I've learned firsthand in Star Wars, unless there's a body, you cannot prove anything.
And even then, there's negotiation. There's room for negotiation.
Yeah.
Even then, sometimes you get Maul
I was gonna say Maul, literally cut
I
in
was
half.
hoping we
It's
were going
fine.
to get through this without referencing that guy. Apparently not.
Yeah.
We're good. It's fine.
Overall, with a lot of these things, you know, I like what you brought up there about, yes, they're the blood family, but no, they're not. You know, when you go to the first episode of Bad Batch, but then, you know, really more so this one, it's this interesting sort of inverse where most of these found families, whether it's Rey and everyone she meets in the sequel trilogy, whether it's Ezra and the Ghost Crew, Han, you know, and Luke and Leia and everybody, those are all really traditional found families where it's like you are finding what you need, but not necessarily where you belonged scientifically. But like Omega kind of rides that line of both, where it's like you do belong with us thematically, but you also belong with us because you are the unchristened member of the Bad Batch. You're the other enhanced clone. Like you should be here. So there's a little bit also of not just finding yourself, but also embracing your truth and sort of like your weirdness and everything. Where, you know, like with Rey, I see that connection because Rey was meant for nefarious purpose and everything like that, and all of that stuff that's been expanded upon. But it's not like Rey went to the Sith cult and was like we could be friends. Like she didn't redeem the Sith cult and find her place with them. But the Bad Batch, they are the freaks that she was meant to sit with at the lunch table, which she literally does in that first episode. And so it's interesting to see sort of how they have parallels between her visually, how she's, I mean, my theory, and I know that Tori and I have talked about this, Eli, I don't know about you, but my theory is that she's a mimic, kind of like Taskmaster in Marvel. I think that she is able to use all of their abilities because she has this technical aptitude. She has accuracy with the first time she ever uses the blaster.
I like the idea that she's like a combination of all of them. I'm going to throw out a very hot take here. I think that I'd come around to it, but I think I'd be against if they made her force sensitive. I think it's
I don't think they need to do it again. Because the thing is like, and Tori and I have talked about this again off the air too, and I'll let Tori speak on it here. It's really close at this moment to the Grogu storyline, and if you did that, it would be one step too far.
It's very close, yes. And I would be remiss in this conversation, which we're going to kind of, I mean, you know, in talking about Rebels, you know, of course there is Hera, a more like motherly figure, but, you know, Star Wars really does mom's kind of dirty most of the time, so it'd be nice to see a story like this that's maybe has a mom involved. Again, I do think Omega's story is hopefully headed in a far different direction than Grogu's, but it's very, very similar. And also piggybacking off of the talk about, you know, force sensitivity and cloning and things like that. I'm interested to see where this is going, but yes, I think if you brought in the force sensitivity, it would be a little too much. And as I've said a million times, I don't mind the Jedi, it's fine, but we can have stories that are not fully centered on.
I'm the biggest Jedi fanatic, but I cannot have another force sensitive kid story right now. I don't want to do that. The minute I was enjoying Aftermath quite a bit, but the minute that Omega shot Crosshair's blaster out of his hand, I'm like, stop now. I can see where this could go. Stop it. It
has
somewhere
to be
out
the
there.
mimic thing. I have to hold out hope that it's the mimic thing because
somewhere out there, Dave Filoni laughs.
Like Dave does. Or he goes, or he does the Dave thing where he goes, interesting.
Yeah, I'm right there with both of you again. I'm a Jedi Force fanatic as well, Eli, but it's just, you know, you got to mix it up and you got to tell a couple different stories. And I agree. A big point, like Tori said, is to get some sort of maternal figure involved that is not necessarily, you know, again, we love some of these moms and some of them for story reasons. Things had to go the way they went, like with Shmi, but there are some of them that definitely could have carried on and perhaps should have carried on. And there are ones that are great, but they pop in and then we don't see them again. Like Vanessa Doza is a character that I ride hard for, who is a mom that is there and lives and is great, but then we don't have more stories in that era. So it's like, wait, come back. Like,
Hey,
Give us
everyone,
more
hey
stuff.
everyone, in my millionth plug for this, if you have not seen Star Wars Resistance, go watch Star Wars Resistance, because it is, in my opinion, the unsung hero of like the new Disney Star Wars canon. Everyone, you can talk about your Last Jedis and your Rebels and all of that.
Everyone I've seen that watches it loved it. So,
and I was a bit,
I didn't like it.
And I was a bit. I don't think I've been I've been a bit slow. I was a bit slow. I think I watched everything by the time season 2 had like just wrapped. But like, man, so much good stuff, and it goes to so many interesting places. Here's another thing I found interesting. Another Omega and Rey quick parallel. Both of them, by the situations they've been raised in, Rey was abandoned, and Omega didn't seem like she received love of any kind on Kamino. They search for unnecessary validation into their found families, even after it's clear that they care for both of them. There's that line in here. Where was it? Oh yeah. Where she says, what was it? Yeah, she I'm trying to remember when this is in the episode. I was not very helpful to myself in pointing where this is. Where she just simply asked them, "Did I do something wrong?" And there's that line from beginning of Rise of Skywalker: "I will earn your brother's saber." You don't need, and you know, everyone is like, why do you want to earn Luke's saber? You've already gotten there. But Rey and Omega don't believe their place yet. It's as a result of their upbringing, they don't believe their own hype yet.
Yeah, and that's, you know, the Kaminoans are so cold, you know. It's not that they're bad, but it's just like, it's a cold, it's sterile, it's
it's like a hospital.
It's just a monotonous existence.
I know there's that Lucas explanation about the whole they can see in ultraviolet colors thing. Yeah, that's cool for canon lore stuff, but like the cooler idea is that they are such these emotionless, like, you know,
right,
cloners.
No, it's true,
scientists.
and I think that the you know, tying in with that, sort of like the last thing that I wanted to bring up about the episode is that this episode does a great thing with the entire Star Wars universe, which is the idea of it doesn't introduce chain codes, because Mandalorian did that, but it chronologically introduces chain codes. And in Mandalorian, and it expands on them, because in Mandalorian we hear chain codes and we're like, oh, what's that? And then you're like, oh, I guess it's kind of like a driver's license. This episode shows you that it was a tool of fascism. Chain codes was like, you don't just register and you have one. Like, you are forced to register. That's how they convert your money.
You're not going anywhere,
or you're not going anywhere. You can't board things. And so when you get the client in grief giving him the mission to find Grogu, the only part of Grogu's chain code that they have is his age, and so that's how they know that he's 50 years old, which is interesting because it raises questions of like, why does Grogu have but also like, why does Grogu have an incomplete registration? It's like, did he get rescued while somebody was trying to register him at the temple? Like, there's a lot of cool, interesting story stuff that you could do there. But what I like about it is that Omega has to make this choice, building off everything the three of us have said, right as, you know, 10 feet away, people are registering and getting their identities stripped, essentially, and being reduced to numbers. Is that this is all happening, and amidst this situation, she's got these fake chain codes, and that's the whole plan with Tech, and we need to get Cut and Sue out of here so they can avoid having this happen to them. And that's when she makes the choice. And that's the great thing about the transition from Clone Wars to Empire, which is why I resent it when people say this is just Clone Wars season 8. It's like, no, it's not.
No,
it's
not.
It's a sequel. It's a sequel to Clone Wars.
It's a bridge.
Clone Wars season 7 ended. The
bridge.
Clone Wars ended. That was the point of the ending of the show, is that it ended.
Yeah, or else they would have just called this the Clone Wars. People would have been hyped. Why would you're not going to get rid of a name that makes money? So it's like Vader's last scene in Clone Wars is so essential because he's at the grave site, not just of clones that he knew, but he's at the grave site of the clones that stood by Ahsoka, painted their helmets orange, that embraced what they wanted to be. And he's there with stormtroopers who are automatons. It's about the death of individuality, this entire era. So by the time you get to Solo, Jedi Fallen Order, Rebels, and Rogue One, those 4 stories that help make up this era too, you can see that it's your Saw Gerreras and your Cal Kestis and your Ghost crew and your Cassian and Jyn and Chirrut. These characters are all under the thumb trying to be themselves. And that's the life that she chooses here.
The idea that they're creating fake identities for Omega, and that Omega very nearly chooses a literally fake identity.
Noticing like smaller story beats that still connected to that larger like found family story. I thought it was really fun that of all people that they went to go visit, it was Cut and Sue, because that is a prime example of and what Alden said earlier, which I feel like I'm going to butcher the way in which he said it, but essentially like there are, and it's kind of like the same thing with the covert, right? Of like you have this network that gives you what you need to survive, but it doesn't mean that that's the right path for you. Like maybe spiritually there is something else that you need to go do, or someone else you need to go meet, and like that's exactly how it is with Cut. Like Cut was a clone, he had an entire clone family, but said, "Oh nope, time to cut and run," you know?
Oh man! Oh man!
And what's great about that I love is that I think that's why you don't have a scene of, because I thought that when Omega ran back to the Bad Batch, I thought we would get a scene of Cut and Sue being like, "Oh no, the kid!" Like, but Cut would understand that.
Yeah,
you know, Cut would be like, she's like me. You know, she's an individual.
And that's why I think when I first watched the episode, I was like, are they just going to let her go? But yeah, of all people who would understand the most, it would be him.
I had this little bit of resentment for Echo in that episode, because he was like, people are, before the clones were trying to get our individuality beyond the numbers. And now that people are signing up to get numbers. I'm like, stop it, Echo. That's our job, not yours. It's our job to do the deep out. It's not yours. Honestly, stop it.
Totally, the writers analyzing their own story, but not in a way that not in a way that's unearned. Echo to me is still in that process of like finding his place. He does a lot of thinking out loud.
Yeah, I think he's in like disbelief of everything that's happening. Just like visiting, like visiting.
If I were Echo,
we visit deserters now, and he's like. Like, we're deserters too. Like
the last thing I can think of in the episode is just the lingering sort of, and how poignant it is for Omega, who maybe doesn't even know Rex, but the other guys definitely do. Is that Cut is like, oh yeah, Rex, he was here yesterday. You just missed him. Like they are following in the path of Rex, who is truly, alongside Gregor and Wolf, who is truly the last vestige of this clone brotherhood by the time of Rebels. And he's literally in the episode we're about to talk about, just as an old man.
Yeah, that's a great segue.
Yeah, so segues, you just gotta.
This is why a scene between theme works. A scene between themes works so well, because just you just.
But yeah, I didn't even do that intentionally. I was like, oh yeah, Rex is in the Rebels finale, but yeah, like they're following in this path and trying to figure out how to be. And we're not talking about the Fennec episode, but the Fennec episode is really them having to learn how to be scoundrels a little bit. Like we do have to lie, cheat, and steal our way in this new world. We're not military. We can't just show up and be like, we're Clone Force 99. Like people don't care anymore.
Yeah,
that's not a thing.
And they could be hunted down. They're fugitives.
Yeah.
Speaking of that excellent segue, do we want to just go to Rebels Family Reunion
Yeah,
Farewell
let's
Part 2?
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down.
So, one of the things, if I can just start off the bat, that I love, is that, we have that, as I talked about before, we have those defining events in the 3. We have the Sin, it's Din going back for Grogu. In Cut and Run, it's Omega deciding to go with Batch. I think we kind of have 2, but the one I really focused on was Ezra's confrontation with Palpatine in The Remains of the Temple. And I like the idea. I love this idea that... Oh, and by the way, props to both of you for having an episode that literally has the world between worlds in it for the first episode of the Theme Between Themes. That's good. I like that.
That is true.
That Ezra rejects his blood family for his found family. That he realizes, the implication there, and of course we don't really know what would have happened if Ezra stepped into whatever Palpatine was planning for him. But, if we take it at absolute face value, what would have happened is that Ezra would have never become a Jedi. The rebellion would have never gotten as far as it had under the Ghost Crew. And in that moment, Ezra is choosing the family that he's made.
Yep, that choice again, making that conscious choice.
It's that choice again.
And I think that, the reason why we wanted this one last and why I think it works is, like we said, you got the parental choice, the child's choice, and then this is coming together and letting go. This is sort of like the culmination of all of those.
That's
where
interesting.
Ezra has to say, which he learned with Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds episode, the actual episode of World Between Worlds. It's like you could give in to temptation, maybe he can do it. Like, maybe obviously we don't trust Sheev. Yeah, we don't trust Sheev, but maybe he could have gotten Kanan back. Maybe he could step through that portal there and go into the kitchen or the living room or whatever with his parents. Maybe he could. We don't believe it, but maybe he could.
There's that gift from Last Jedi that I'm thinking of right now. It's the DJ. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But it doesn't. But it would undermine your lessons. Like what everything that everybody has sacrificed, including your blood parents, including Kanan, has led up to this point where every single character now is at their strongest point of unity. They believe in each other, which is what, Tori, what you touched on earlier, that everybody, how you joked like, oh, I wouldn't be able to let him go as easy as they do. But it's that beautiful moment with Chopper where Chopper opens the air vent for him in this finale to let him go. And I think that might be in part 1. But in any case, it's that Chopper and Hera and Sabine and Zeb at this point are saying, if we've truly done right by him, if he really is our boy, if he really is everything that we've believed that he is and everything that we've loved about him for these 4 years, then it's going to work. This is about believing in blind faith almost in your family, which everybody sort of gets to that point. And every found family is tested in that way. And we've referenced IG and Queel as sort of just an example, but even in that moment, it's that Din doesn't trust IG, and Queel says, "Do you trust me?" And he says, "Well, yeah." And he's like, "Well, then you'll trust my work." And that's sort of what we're able to see here with this family, is that Hera and everybody letting him go, and him being able to beat Thrawn by echoing Kanan's sacrifice. Literally the choreography being the same, of one arm in front of the other arm, and using the Force and trusting in his own connection. It was this family that got him to open up to his connection with animals and everything that we see with Ezra throughout. So it's to me, it's the perfect moment of everybody plays their part, everything works out, and then how does it end? In an open-ended way, but with Sabine saying, Sabine now an older woman, we're not sure how much older, but believing that it did work, that it did work out for him.
I'd like to. There's a lot of just incredible lines with Palpatine here.
Mhm.
Like Ian McDiarmid, again, he never has to go this hard, but he always does. No matter where he is, he just
Does
do that for us.
Yeah.
yeah. He just knocks out part of it every single time. There's that when he's tempting Ezra, he goes, "This is what you want, isn't it?" Which is now I just realized the parallel back to Return of the Jedi when he looks at Luke's lightsaber. He goes, "This is what you want, isn't it?" And
Yeah.
I love that Ezra is tempted by what he wants, but realizes that, as is the way of the light and the dark and the balance between the two, it's not what he needs. Yeah. There's a couple other ones in there. The gateway will not be open forever. I'm like, of course it won't be, because the dark side always wants that quick and easy path. The final one I love, which is, like, again, there's no way they knew about this, but, like, it's just so good. When Palpatine says to Ezra, this is the one that blew my mind, "So few have the choice to live the life they want." And then I go back to the end of Rise Skywalker. Who are you? Rey Skywalker. I'm like, how ironic, isn't it, that Palpatine's own granddaughter is one of the few that makes the choice to live the life she wants. Like, that's like, there's no way they could have known that because of how the writing interfered and all that kind of stuff, like, and how everything was structured. But like, that's really good. I really
It's also
like
that the irony of Palpatine is that he's a very he projects a lot. He projects probably the only other person that projects as much as he does is Anakin. And he so few get to live the life they want is because he has constantly been thwarted up to this point. Even with 20 plus years of Imperial rule, he still hasn't achieved what he wanted, and he'll constantly be on that quest to immortality until literally he's dust. And so it becomes this interesting sort of telling on yourself moment, which I love. And what's cool about Ezra in that moment, obviously it's the choosing of the found family in our big theme here, but it's that he knows he has to echo the people. He has to echo the people in that found family.
I just got that.
Where like, obviously we could have long conversations about each of these, but just to break it down real quick, Kanan is the obvious one. Gave his life for the family, gave everything that he had, going back to see in the pilot of the Bad Batch, all the loss that he's had, being able to put the cause above himself. Hera has had to choose between the rifts in her blood family with Cham Syndulla and her found family to be able to better the cause. Same with Sabine, who was the pariah from Clan Ren and House Vizsla, and how she had to do all this stuff. Same with Zeb, who was he thought himself to be one of the last of this broken, race that was genocided by the Empire. And then even Chopper, who we thought was just a cranky droid, but then we find out came from a crashed Y-Wing in the Clone Wars. And he has that great moment where he's just looking at the crashed ship, and Ezra's like, "What's up with Chopper?" And Hera says, "Well, he we picked him out of a crashed ship, and that's where he came from." And so you're like, "Oh, even Chopper has PTSD. He's a war veteran." Ezra has to bring all of that together. Everybody else, either before the show or in the show, has made that hard choice, and we scooped this kid up, and now it's his turn. And so, Filoni went hard in season 4 promotion and interviews, talking about how, yes, we've told the stories of many characters, but this is still the story of Ezra Bridger at the end of the day. And this was the moment where Ezra, from being space Aladdin all the way up to everything else that he would be, like, it ends definitively here, which I thought was really cool.
There's another thing I was going to talk about. Oh, this is a really good one. I love this little idea that, of course, the found family that Ezra builds over this, over the entire course of the show is the Ghost Crew. But what if it wasn't the only found family he built? I like the idea that another one of Ezra's found families that he goes back to over and over again. Whenever he has a chance to, whenever they're not on the run, whenever they want to, whenever they want to, whenever they have a vantage point and they can run the missions they want to run, almost always Ezra's drawn to Lothal, back to Lothal. And it has this great connection with, I feel like the people of Lothal are another bound family for Ezra, because he changes them. Because, I mean, of course, the Ghost Crew does a monumental thing in getting the Empire off Lothal, but what do we see right after Ezra's gone? The people of Lothal rising up to, take down the Empire in that crazy sequence where they fly over and we see the stormtroopers coming out. I also I forget who it was. I think it might have been Alden. It might have been Tori though. About the idea that the Ghost Crew it's not just the Chopper, Sabine, Hera, and Zeb of the past 4 seasons. They have that expanded Ghost Crew. They have Rex. They have Wolf. They have Gregor. They have Ketsu. They have Hondo. They have Melch. They have
Melch.
Melch.
When Melch, by the way, when Melch survives getting shot in this episode, it's the best.
It's multi-species, multi-race, multi-gender, all that kind of stuff. It's as diverse as you can get, and they're fighting against as we've talked about with the Bad Batch and certainly in the Mandalorian, the faceless stormtroopers.
Yeah.
They have bonded together. It's the idea that the dark side is going to those Rise Skywalker metaphorical ideas. The dark side is all this power combined into a source, but the light is they're going to the Last Jedi, the spark that lights all these candles. That it's about unity. It's about coming together. It's
100-pound rock or 100 pounds of feathers. Or I guess 101 pounds of feathers. Because to emphasize how much these individuals can do, and that's something that you see throughout the show. I love that you brought up Lothal, because so many people what is it? Is it Old Joe, who's the bartender on Lothal?
Yeah.
Old Joe,
bartender, yeah.
It's so much of it is about we loved your parents, they were always kind, they were always good,
and Ryder, I forgot about Ryder.
Ryder's a great character too for that reason. Is so many of them, even the animals that Ezra has connected with throughout the show, it shows that the good that you do, the kindness that you show people, does sort of bring them into your extended family at the end of the day, and that if it's true and right and righteous, that it'll pay off for you. That'll pay off for you later. Which I think this is one of the strongest finales of any show that I've ever seen for that reason.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, you brought up the extended found family, and then I know we've already brought up Rex and Gregor a couple times, but I wanted to bring them up because they, for me, are kind of that extra smaller scale version of this found family story, and also bring in that making a choice element, because when Gregor dies and Rex is kind of standing over him, he says, it was an honor, Rex, to be able to choose to fight for something that was so big that I was able to consciously make the choice to join this cause. So I just love that.
And there's that episode that I watched very recently again, the Missing in Action. It's from the D-Squatter, where we first see Gregor, who was amnesia-ridden from the Battle of Serish, and the idea, Borkus, who is his, who is the diner guy that he worked for, that he was basically enslaved to, which, by the way, is one of the best names in Star Wars. He demeaned him to think that he wasn't important, that he didn't have an impact. And we get to see this gradual and very subtle but very, very strong arc with Gregor, where we see that by the end of his life, he didn't die the way Borkus and to a certain extent he did. He thought he was gonna die on Apifar. But he died fighting for something that he felt passionate about, that people who regarded him as an equal, not as an underling.
Yeah, and I like that, Tori, that you brought that up just in the context of having just talked about Bad Batch, because we see so much of how, literally how their choices were taken with the chip and everything, but also just this idea that yes, the chip is a literal like taking of choice, but just thematically in Star Wars, that there's so many types of villains in Star Wars, be they dark side or not, that try to make it seem like you don't have a choice. And I think that that's a big lesson for the Ghost Crew and for the people of Lothal, that everybody, coming from their most broken points. I mean, a key member of this found family in the end is Alexander Callus, who we haven't talked about, who's just one of my favorite Rebels characters, and how it might be in the first part again, because there's you can't watch, you got to watch them together, but he tells Price in one of my favorite lines, which is, "The day I betrayed your empire was the day I stopped betraying myself." And how he had been he'd been groomed to be this perfect Imperial agent and all these things, and he had this bright future ahead of him with the Empire, and he threw it all away because he realized, like, there is always a choice. There's always a choice in the end. I mean, maybe you make too many wrong ones and you don't really get to come back. Like, I don't think that if Palpatine was like, never mind, I'm good, like, I don't think that you should be able to just redeem yourself willy-nilly. But
so then again, it's like, I was thinking about this because I was thinking about that fortune cookie that Jacob and I were making fortune cookies, and I was doing one for Return of the Jedi, and my fortune cookie was no one is beyond redemption. And I thought about that Palpatine example, but then I thought about and I'm like, but Palpatine wouldn't get a chance for redemption. And then I'm like, yeah, Eli, he wouldn't, but that's because Palpatine's character can never, like, just by the defining aspect of his character, is never going to make that choice. He has repeatedly shown to us that he cannot make that choice. But going back to your point about Callus, which I think is a great point, and like at this point I feel like in this episode specifically they're like beating us over the head with found family a little bit, because they literally tell us in the epilogue, Sabine says that Zeb brings Callus to Lyrasan to show him that there are still Lasat alive, a world where he was welcome as one of them.
Yeah.
Literally as one of them is the line. Which is,
That's true. And then with Jason, also in that epilogue, it's the idea that sometimes your found family carries on. Literally. Like found family becomes blood family. And how they're intermingled. And like Jason Syndulla, the hint that he's force sensitive, without us showing, like, that he's a lot like his father. It's like it's also that idea too. And then Sabine adopts through Ezra the cause of Lothal, becoming that guardian, that's been watching over it as it rebuilds before she leaves with Gandalf the White. I mean, Ahsoka. So yeah.
Yeah.
Star Wars is good.
Star Wars is good. Star Wars is good, isn't it? I definitely agree with that sentiment. Tori, do you have anything else, or Alden, of course, before we get on to some speed round questions?
I don't think so.
We're going to start with a really tough one. So, who is your favorite Star Wars character?
Boba Fett.
Solid choice.
I'm actually kind of surprised. I don't mean to slow it down on the first question.
No, he's always my number one. He's always.
I thought you were gonna go Sai.
A1 day one. I love Sai dearly, but Boba goes like back to my childhood. So
that's fair.
I guess
look, Sai was gonna be in there, but Boba. She's
in the running. She's definitely in there.
Boba's gonna be in that number 2 slot, but sometimes fate steps in to rescue the wretched.
True.
Exactly.
I love that quote so much.
It's fantastic.
It's one of the best.
I feel so incredibly blessed that The Mandalorian Season 2 gave us not one, but 2 different stand-ins for sometimes things just work out that way.
Yeah.
The other one is that
Yeah.
Cobb Vanth one, which I use way too much. You know,
Both
sometimes
suns
both suns
shine.
shine on a womp rat's tail.
I want that on a pillow immediately.
I'm not even kidding. I'm gonna get one of these times. I don't know if it'll be Celebration or what, but I'm gonna get a tattoo of a womp rat with suns shining on its tail.
Sunshine.
That's
I'm
great.
doing it.
That's great.
Fantastic.
Okay. What is your Star Wars movie ranking? Or if you don't have a specific ranking, you can do a top
Like
5.
full
or a favorite.
order. You want
Full
all
order.
of them?
Full order. Go off.
Oh Jesus. Okay. Okay. Rogue One is number 1.
Okay.
Phantom Menace is number. No, sorry, I messed up already. Rogue. No, this is hard.
Not this again. Dang it.
Truthfully, I have like a top 3, and the rest are kind of like interchangeable. But I will try and do the full ranking for you. So Rogue One's number 1. Empire Strikes Back is number 2. The Phantom Menace is number 3. That like doesn't change hardly ever. I would say number 4 for me is probably I guess The Last Jedi. I really like The Last Jedi. Yeah. Number 4 is The Last Jedi. 5 I would say Return of the Jedi. 6 A New Hope.
Our lists are so different. I love it though. I love
Really?
it.
6 A New Hope.
I internally sighed as I saw my beloved Return of the Jedi being put
Okay, listen, I like it. That's the thing though, is I really, truly, I have the 3 that are like my standout favorite, and then it's kind of like everything else.
Then it's like 4A, 4B, 4C.
I like everything else. It's just
love the Phantom Menace love. You know, that movie is like, again, it's
yeah.
not as high on my list as it used to be. It a long time ago was my favorite Star Wars movie. A long time ago.
And honestly, there are some days where it kind of switches places with Empire. I'm not gonna lie. They kind of move around a little bit. Rogue One's always number 1 though. That doesn't change. That's always the same. But yeah, where was I? I don't even know. Oh, I didn't even put Solo in here. Okay, can we quit? Because I don't.
You got a top 3 or 4. You got a top 3.
We got a top 3. We're good. We're fine.
Around a lot because Solo has really become.
We got Rogue One. We got Rogue One.
movie.
We got the Phantom Menace, the Empire, Last Jedi, and Solo is what I'm going with as your top 5.
Good.
Which is a solid top 5.
Solid.
What is your favorite non-movie Star Wars media that people are missing out on? Can't be a movie, but anything else.
That people are missing out on?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Go, make your elevator pitch.
Oh, okay. Actually, yes. Okay.
I know what you're gonna say.
Very
I know what
obscure.
you're gonna say.
You do? What am I gonna say?
What
am I gonna say?
I think that you're gonna grab the Dressing the Galaxy.
Oh no, that's actually a good idea. Actually, no, it was a different book. Dusty Galaxy is the best. Where is she? Oh no, she's in the bookshelf. Sorry. That I highly recommend, but it's very expensive because it's hard to find it. Yeah, that's probably, you're right. That's probably my favorite. Sorry, I immediately thought of just like stories, not like quote unquote like what I would consider reference materials.
You just said media.
That's a fair point.
I did.
Okay.
I've never actually had anybody answer anything not story related, so I had assumed.
I'm gonna do both because I actually had a story related one.
Yeah.
But Dressing a Galaxy is the best. If you're into costumes, like that's it, baby. Like I love looking at just beautiful, nice, just high definition, beautiful pictures of most of the prequel costumes, and of course a ton of Padme costumes because those are like my favorite. So and lots of little blurbs on the side about even original trilogy costumes as well. Like it's a really nice pairing of old and new. I love it. It's beautiful. It's also massive. It's great. I guess my story based one, which is what I immediately went to, was I'm a big fan of the Canto Bight collection of stories that I feel like nobody has really read. The Canto Bight collection of stories is great. It's just like really weird aliens running around Canto Bight doing like seedy stuff. It's great.
Yeah, you get Kedpin Shotclop gets like a
Kedpin gets his own little story. Oh yeah. Yeah, if you like the little one-eyed guy in the bathhouse who is having a rough day.
That's a really good call. Laura Kelly loves those.
Yeah, I was actually gonna mention Laura. I'm like, I hope she's read that because I know that's her favorite, one of her favorite background characters. Speaking of background characters, what is your favorite Star Wars background character?
I guess probably Sice Noodles. Yeah. But it's
solid
hard
choice.
too, because I also really, is she really a background? I guess mainly a
Yeah.
background.
I was gonna like draw the
character.
line at like a Boba Fett thing because like he's not a background character anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's like, Sextonals is kind of originally, because I was like, oh, I also, like, R Sing's also up there for me. They're both really traditionally background characters, but as time has gone on, they've gotten
It's
more
hard,
prominent
yeah.
roles.
But,
So it's kind of hard
yeah,
because I feel like that happens with a lot of
Sai
good
appeared
characters.
Sai appeared in one episode of the Clone
But she
Wars.
was an important part of that episode.
Absolutely. I felt like that's where I draw a line that like that's the thing with me and Ochi right now. I'm like, can I still call him a background character if he's been the main character in like 5 comics? I'm like, probably still can.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a small enough piece of media. They're not,
Yeah.
they're not Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
So,
speaking of interesting Star Wars characters and species, what is, in your opinion, the coolest Star Wars species?
very hard, but I think I'm going to always come back to my tried and true, which is the Mon Calamari. I love them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just beautiful.
No, I love the Mon Calamari. Can't go wrong with Mon Calamari. What is your favorite Star Wars planet?
Okay, so I have 2 for a reason. I feel like everyone picks Naboo. Let's be honest, Naboo is like the best. But I really love Bespin as well. So I try to say Bespin to shake it up because I feel like in a lot of ways, like people be like, where would you go if you could go anywhere? Everyone says Naboo. So I'm like, let me say Bespin.
This was actually,
I love
it's funny
Cloud
you
City.
bring that up. The first question, so Jacob wrote this question as originally as where would you go on vacation? And everybody chose Naboo or Alderaan.
Well, because it's the best. Hello.
Yeah, and we were like,
gorgeous.
After about 5 or 6 guests we had on, we're like
we gotta change it up. We gotta
we're
say
gonna
except
change
for
that
Naboo. Don't pick
because
Naboo.
because I go Naboo or Alderaan, but like cool Star Wars planet, I go like something like.
I didn't say
Right?
Naboo. I was a real one when I answered.
What did you say?
What
I don't
did you
actually
say?
I don't actually remember what I said, but
remember.
I'm pretty sure I would have said the Forest Moon of Endor.
Endor's a good one.
Endor's a good one. If you had a job in the Star Wars universe, what would it be?
Okay, so I go back and forth on this a lot because I have thought about this. I could see 2 different things. I think there's a large part of me that wants to be a part of like the seedier side of the galaxy, like the smugglers and bounty hunters and stuff. Like I would love, like I think those are my favorite kinds of characters. So I think I would like to maybe be in that world. And so thinking about like my skills and stuff, like how would I make that work as a person who just kind of like makes art for a living? So I think I would be some sort of like forger or something. Like I would make forgeries of things.
Interesting.
Or because I'm obsessed with all the creatures, I would be just like a vet, like a
galactic veterinarian.
Yeah, or just like a Star Wars Jane Goodall or something.
I love that.
That's
those are my options. Yes.
I mentioned this quote a lot. It's my favorite Star Wars behind the scenes quote. I'm surprised we got this far in the episode without me talking about it. Cue probably very bad George Lucas impression.
Oh
yeah, it's like poetry. They rhyme. Every stanza sort of rhymes with the last. Hopefully it'll work. What is your favorite example of it's like poetry? They rhyme in the Star Wars universe. Does not have to be movies. It can be anything.
Oh wow, that's deep. I need a moment.
Sitting here like trying to predict all of Tori's answers before she says them. So now I want to know if I was right on this one.
I need a moment. Oh God, just tell me what it is so I can say it, because I don't know.
That's one way to do it.
That is one way to do it. What would you say?
I think that the perfect poetry moment with Tori would have to be.
Oh, I know what it is. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, really? Dude.
No, you say it because it just came to me, and I'm wondering if it's what you're gonna say. Go.
It's got to be Boba Fett saying, "I'm just a simple man." Yeah, the same as his father. Wow, look at that.
That is
up.
People,
that is nuts. No, that's
we
so
have just
true.
witnessed.
That's it.
We've just witnessed the formation of the newest dyad in the Force.
Dude, we're a dad in the hype, man. We got it. Xavier style.
That was good. That was really good. That was, yeah. I remember a similar reaction to hearing that in The Mandalorian. I'm like, he didn't.
I yelled.
It's that, and then it's in The Believer when he drops the seismic charge. I was just like, Attack of the Clones fans eating good.
True. True.
Yeah, man. If you could take one item or force power from the Star Wars universe into the real world, what would it be?
One item? Oh, wow. Oh my god. That's like really hard. Hold on. I need a moment. I'm so sorry. Because I don't really think I want force powers, TBH. I think the only thing I would maybe go for is like force lightning, but I don't. That's okay. I don't need it.
Why do I feel like Alden said psychometry? Was that you or was that somebody else?
I think I did say force psychometry. I think that was my answer. Because I was definitely thinking about, and I think I stand by that. I was thinking about like Cal, like when he plays Sears' instrument and gets to play her song and stuff. Like the ability to sort of do that with objects would be cool.
So, okay. So, is there a limit on how big this thing is?
That is an interesting question.
Say no, just so we could hear what it was.
No, I was already glad to say no.
Okay. So there's a lot of things that I would want from a Star Wars universe, but this is the one that I think this is what first came to mind, so I'm gonna roll with it. The Maz Kanata statue with like the courtyard that's around it.
Oh,
that's
an item. That's an item.
In front of my house.
Inspect all the flags. No, I'd go there.
Yeah.
I'd do that. I'd do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, I totally, yeah. I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
I've technically asked you this question as right into Ahch-To Radio, but I want to hear you say it again for personal reasons, and because this is what we do on Star Wars in the Galaxy. Look, I'm gonna show you the name of an innocent woman. She was doing her job. She hit the ship. It's not her fault that they used a decoy. It's definitely like so 100% not her fault. Give me a second. I'm gonna share this screen. I need to say this woman's name.
Oh, Zam Wessel.
Thank you.
It's Zam Wessel.
So
I know the argument. I know, what was it, in like a video game or something?
Wazell? When it was
like, no, it's Zam Wessel. I'm so sorry.
We got a message from fake George Lucas on our last episode saying it was Wazell. But that's not gonna.
I don't know. Fake George Lucas sounds fake.
Yeah. It sounds fake. Anyway, before we end, I would like to ask the both of you, plug your stuff. Plug all your stuff.
Okay. So you can find the Ahch-To Radio podcast feed everywhere you get your podcasts, and that's including Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, Anchor, all those good platforms. But particularly Apple, because that's where you can leave us some reviews. We really appreciate that, and any type of feedback, as well as for In a Galaxy. I'm sure you're going to say that, but I'm going to say it for you anyway. That's at Ahch-To Radio, and that includes my show, Ahch-To Radio proper, where you can hear all the interviews I do with people from across the Star Wars space, people that have helped make things in Star Wars, people that have written Star Wars, people that are Star Wars fans, and then as well as the Mandalorian Creed, our wonderful sister's show, which has just wrapped up its second season. And Tori can tell you a little bit more about that and where you can find her personally. You can find me at AD_Strider on Twitter. But to pass it over to Tori, and you might be able to tease the third season, which I think we locked down.
Yeah, I'll just say it. I don't care. I'll say it. Okay.
Do it.
So I don't care. I'll do it. The Mandalorian Creed is a show that is comprised of short series on specific Star Wars topics. And yeah, so we had my first Star Wars weekend, and then we did lightsabers, and now we're gonna do, drumroll please. Okay. Droids. So Droids is gonna be the next
Oh,
one. So I'm
good
really excited about
stuff.
that. Excited to get into that. But yeah, you can follow the Mandalorian Creed on the Ahch-To Radio feed, as Alden said. And you can follow me on the internet at the Mandalorian on Twitter and Instagram, and then you can also check out my shop, Creature Cartel. That's Creature Cartel on Etsy, and Creature Cartel and Creature Cartel Shop, respectively, on Twitter and on Instagram.
All of these links will be in our description of the show and the show notes. In the meantime, thank you for listening to this episode of Star Wars in the Galaxy, the first episode of A Theme Between Themes. We already have plans in the work for more of these episodes, with different guests and different topics and all that kind of stuff. But next week is going to return back to our regular show format. Jacob and I will be back talking about 3 of the most consequential episodes, in my opinion, of the Clone Wars. Overlords, Altar of Mortis, and Ghosts of Mortis. That's going to be a fun one. In the meantime, until then, you can find us Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Anchor, Google Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your podcast, we will be there. You can follow us on Twitter at In a Galaxy Pod, Instagram at Star Wars in a Galaxy. You can check out our YouTube channel, just Star Wars in a Galaxy. Please email us at slvinagalaxy@gmail.com with your hot takes and questions and 6 degrees of Star Wars. And, of course, as Alden previously mentioned, leave us ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts or any other services that leave ratings and reviews. It really does help in our visibility. And I think that's going to be it. Until next time, may the Force be with you. Always.